countries which have more restrictive laws on bribery, they may not be able to compete globally in some situations. So over there, if you have more strict business laws, then they will be not more competitive in those in some situation, not all situations. Remember that one. In some situations. So it mostly happens to underdeveloped countries. Okay, if U.S. government and Chinese government both are bidding for a project in South Africa to construct a bridge, a river bridge, right? So Chinese contractors, they give bribe to an African country over there, the underdeveloped country. So maybe the Chinese, they got the contract, but US firm, they are rejected. Why? Because under US laws, the bribery is not acceptable. Even though the project is in Africa, but if they are found by the US government that they bribe that the African for bidding contract, then they will be penalized by the Security and Exchange Commission in the US as well. So this happens. Tax breaks. So though not necessarily a subsidy, but still a form of a subsidy, but still a form of government financial support that might benefit many firms that export products. Tax breaks, okay, like we talk about, okay, for 5 years we are giving tax-free zone, tax-free, situations for 5 years for export of the softwares to promote our software industry. So in that case, many firms will enter their software businesses and produce softwares and export because it's tax-free. Similarly, okay, from 2015 to 2022 to 2027, for 5 years, the government is not going to tax or will have a half tax on heavy industries. This will boost their exports because their cost decreased. Country security laws. Government may impose certain restriction when national security is concerned, which can affect the trade. For example, here, US makes or buys military planes. So if the US want to buy a military plane from China, who has the technology, and maybe when US are flying over China, they can disrupt the technology, and maybe they have the less advantage of their, the Air Force or something. In that case, the government can influence restriction. Okay, we are not going to sell or buy from planes from China. It's like that because they are under our direct, confrontation, or this is our national defense something strategy or whatsoever, right? Now, impact of exchange rate. We talked about that in our last factor. The exchange rate do affect the international flow of funds, right? So how exchange rate affect that one? We talked about, on a very basic level so that you can understand. But now let's talk about in detail. So if a country's currency begins to rise in a value against other currencies, its current account balance should decrease. Why? Because if US currency start rising, you are here. If dollar starts rising against yen, other countries, yuan, yen, euros, then what happened? The Chinese will find products more expensive. Similarly, the Japanese, similarly the European countries. So when exports start decreasing relative to imports, we call this deficit or decrease in current account or trade balance and trade balance, right? So other things being equal, what does it mean? It means what if in Chinese, there is some like machinery that nobody else can make, only US is making. So it's there, autonomous consumption or whatsoever, you have to buy it, otherwise your factory cannot run. So whatsoever is the dollar amount, whether increase it or decrease, you must have to buy from US. In that case, you don't care about the exchange rate, you have to buy it and you will buy it, right? So that's why in normal circumstances, when one currency rises against the other currency, right? So rise in currency is basically negative, have a negative impact on current account and on balance of trade account, right? So why is that? The reason is, as the currency strengthens, goods exported by the country will become more expensive to the importing countries. As a consequence, the demand for such goods will decrease. If dollar is strengthened, right now what's happening in China and all over the world, dollars start rising. So that products that are imported by the countries from US, it's becoming more expensive. So we decreasing it there. As a customer, we are decreasing their or demands or decreasing their consumption. What previously we were buying 4 shampoos from US and now we are buying only 1, or maybe we are seeing substitute from Thailand or more cheaper option, right? Now, how exchange rates may correct a balance of trade deficit. Now the question arises, if currencies start rising, then should government interfere to limit the currencies so that the dollar should the US should interfere the market and say about that we should not let our dollars to increase relative to other currencies, because exchange rate correct the balance of trade by itself. How? For example, we'll talk about what is floating rate and others rate, because we talk about the categories of exchange rate in our coming slides or maybe lectures. We talk about what is floating rate, but in general sense, a floating exchange rate means the exchange rate is determined by the forces of demand and supply. That's it. So floating exchange rate could possibly correct any international trade imbalances between two countries in the following way. Number one, a deficit in a country's balance. Deficit means their imports are greater than exports. So now think in terms of international trade language. We talk about here deficit. Of course, deficit means trade deficit or current account deficit, right? So we talked about that the trade deficit can be the proxy of current account deficit, because the major portion of the current account is trade balance or balance of trade, right? So a trade deficit in the balance of trade suggests that the country is spending more funds on foreign products, right, imports, than it is receiving from export to foreign countries. Because the country is exchanging its currency in greater volume than the foreign demand of its currency, that might place downward pressure on the value of its currency as well. So if imports are more, the thing in terms of dollar and yuan. So goods are delivering and money is coming, but what happens if this is a case of imports? If Americans are buying more Chinese products, then of course they have to pay in yuan, not dollars. In China, the currency is yuan, not dollars, right? So they will be first converting their dollars into yuan and then paying to the goods and services from China. So in that case, the demand for yuan start rising, and what happened? Supply of dollars start rising. So it's like that. You are throwing your currency down and demanding the other currency more, and in that case, at first, dollar was higher, but now Due to more trade, the dollar start rising, start decreasing. So that's why exchange rate may correct a balance of deficit. The government should not interfere because it's the automatic process. One more time. Now let's focus on the words here. A deficit in a country's trade of balance suggests that the country is spending more funds on foreign products, which mean imports, than it's receiving from exports, right? Because the country is exchanging its currency, or you can just say that dollars, in a greater volume of the foreign demand of its currency. This might place a downward pressure on the value of currency because your currency is not demanded by the Chinese. Chinese are sending goods. They are not buying your goods because your dollar is more expensive. So they are not buying your goods. Your exports are decreasing. Instead, you are demanding more. Demand of yuan is increasing. So it means supply of dollars is increased. It causes a downward pressure. So look at or recall your discussion in economics with demand and supply. This is supply, this is demand. What happened? If your demand decreases here, right? Demand is downwards and supply decreases. So we have a new equilibrium. Price of currency, which means exchange rate. Okay, exchange rate is the price of the currency. So price from P to P dash decreases. So previously our dollar was high, and now due to more imports, our dollar decreasing and becoming correcting itself, right? So you don't have to do anything. So once the country's home currency's value declines in response to these factors, it should attract more demand for its product in future. So when dollar is decreasing, right, Chinese will demand more products. So for Chinese, it becoming less expensive to buy because dollar is decreasing. So US exports start rising. So this is a really tricky concept, but it's very easy, right? It is just, you need to just, if you open a picture here, assume that, okay, this is economy. China.